Well, I have to let you know up front the message that is expected, the message that I expected to deliver, the message that is titled in your bulletin. God said no. So I've wrestled with this message all week, and so it's not what we expected, but let's pray that it's what God wanted. We'll just have one primary text for the message, but it's a good one. It's 1 Samuel 17, verse 50. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Now, what I find so funny is every single time I teach on David and Goliath, there's always some biblical scholars that are listening, and they're thinking, really? Really? David and Goliath? Out of all the texts, out of all the stories you could have told, David and Goliath? Really? It's like, we know the story, Jeff. Little guy defeats big guy with a slingshot. It's a cute story, but I already know how this story ends. Which is a fair point. You already know how the story ends. In fact, won't you look at your neighbor and tell them, I know how this story ends. Go ahead, tell them. Now tell your other one, the saved one. Tell your other neighbor, I know how this story ends. Somebody get Penny, she doesn't have a neighbor. So let me tell you, I have this friend. We were in law enforcement together, and we're still in touch with each other. And over the years, although he is a good friend, he's a wonderful friend, but over the years, I've had to set down a couple communication regulations, if you will. For example, if he's telling me about something that happened at work and we're in public, I have to remind him, you cannot act it out. Okay? I'm not getting kicked out of another Cracker Barrel. So that's one. Another communication regulation we have is if he's telling me a story, if it's a negative story, I make him tell me the end first. Then he can give me all of the gritty details, because when he tells stories, he tells stories. I'll say, so, how was your shift? And he'll say, oh, it was a terrible day. And he launches in with the undercooked eggs and goes from there. I'm like, wait. I need to know the end before you do all of that. Did everybody make it out alive? Did anybody get hurt? Did anybody get fired? Did you get to use your taser? How much is your bail? I need to know how it ends before you take me on this roller coaster ride of emotions that was your day. I need to know how it ends. Or I just get kind of stuck in the middle, you know? And maybe you've noticed this, but for some reason, it's different when you know the end of the story, isn't it? If you tell me how the story ends, like, don't worry, it's going to sound crazy, but we worked it all out in the end. It's okay. In fact, that's what I want to know. I just want to know, when you're done telling me what you're going to tell me, everything's okay. Did somebody get punched in the face? Just tell me. And then I can relax and listen to the rest of your story. Because it could have ended a lot differently. How many of you have memories of times, events in your life that could have ended very differently? You remember them? Can you see them in your mind's eye? You remember when that drunk driver had swerved out of his lane and he was coming right at you, and it seemed like at the very last second some angel or something just kind of swished him back into his own lane. Could have ended a lot differently. Or what about when you were in college? Remember when you were in college, and if the cops had pulled you over a time or two, your story would be really different today. So for some of us, it's not that we never did anything wrong, it's just we never got caught. If you had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, your story would have ended a lot differently. And you can polish your halo if you want to, but you know it would have ended very, very differently had it not been for God's divine intervention on your behalf. So please remember how it could have ended. Now maybe this will help, since we already know how David's story ends. Let's spend a few minutes thinking about how David's story could have ended. Because his story could have ended a lot different. Think about it. If David had made some different choices at different moments in his life, we might not even be telling his story today. I mean, yeah, we know Goliath goes down, right? But David still has to fight. He still has to confront the enemy. He still has to come face to face with his fears and then trust God with the rest. And while your story is being written, you too will have to fight. You too will have to confront your enemy. You too will need to come face to face with your fears and trust God with the rest. So again, when I preach David and Goliath, we're tempted to think, I know this one already. I've heard it before. I already know how this story ends, which is a fair point. You already know how the story ends, but David didn't know. David didn't know how David's story would end. David couldn't open a book and read 1 Samuel 17:50. It's different when you know how the story ends. David didn't know. He wasn't able to pull out his phone and open his Bible app, and before he decides whether or not to step onto the battlefield, he wasn't able to open it up and read. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, with a sword in his without a sword in his hand. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. He didn't know. David didn't know. He was shaking in his sandals, holding a sling, trembling, wondering, how will this battle end? David had no idea that one of the greatest victories of his life was only a stone's throw away. And there's somebody here today, and you're facing a battle, and you don't know. You don't know how this is going to play out. You haven't read your victory verse yet. So like David, there you stand, shaking and uncertain. And I want to help you today. See, Goliath was not David's first fight. There were things that David had to confront long before he ever entered into the battle with Goliath. And if any of these things, if he had chosen differently, his story could have ended differently. Perfect example. Did you know that when David defeated this monster of a guy. Did you know when he did that, he was a teenager? Did you know that? Can you imagine if the teenage David then responded to that situation the way teenagers today respond to some situations? Can you imagine? David's dad, Jesse, comes in and says, "Whoa, Dave, don't you ever clean your room? I want you to run these snacks down to your brothers." "Dad, do you know who I am? I'm David, not DoorDash. Who do you think I am? Uber Eats? I'm not dropping nothing off. My name is David. Say my name. David, King David. And you're asking me to be a delivery boy. Please." David already knew a bit of his future, right? He'd already been anointed. He knew eventually he would be king. But here's the thing. If David refuses to be faithful in his present because he's too focused on his future, his story ends differently. David didn't know that God planned to use him in a big way that day. He didn't know. And you don't know what day God will want to use you in a big way. You don't know what conversation could transform someone's life. You don't know what moment could become a holy moment that you remember for the rest of your life. You don't know when a bush is going to burst into flames and just spontaneously combust with the presence of God that gives you a sense of direction for the rest of your life. You don't know. But if you don't show up for the ordinary with a good attitude, things could end a lot differently. In fact, do you think we would even be telling this story today if David had chose differently? What if his story went more like this? Jesse woke up David. David got up, went down to the battle lines with a bad attitude, dropped off the food, threw it at his brothers, called them losers, went back home and took a nap. The end. Could have ended like that. David's story could have ended right there. It could have ended with David being offended. How dare you ask me to do something so meaningless? This would have been an entirely different story if David had ignored the ordinary. So here's what I'm learning. We have to be careful not to neglect the ordinary moments of life. Because opportunity is often revealed in the ordinary. Opportunity is often revealed in the ordinary. And parents, you know this. You know it's not just one conversation with your kids that changes their life forever. It's one conversation after another, after another, after another, and over time. It's not one magical road trip when they turn 16. It's many, many trips, back and forth to school, back and forth to practice, back and forth to games, back and forth to church. It's in the ordinary back and forth of life when opportunity waits to be seized. Long before David ever got to the battle with Goliath, he had been faithfully obedient in the ordinary. And because he was obedient in the ordinary, it led to an extraordinary victory, not just for him, but for his Father in heaven. So we, with the benefit of knowing how David's story ends, we know that, but again, David didn't know. David didn't know how David's story would end. When David set out to deliver his brother's sack lunches, he didn't know there was a giant waiting for him. And the truth is, sometimes we give up way too soon. Sometimes we think we know how it ends, but what if it's not over yet? What if it's not over yet? Yes, you may have wasted a lot of times, but what if God can redeem the years? What if it's not over yet? What if the best of days are not behind you, but rather in front of you? What if the devil is a liar? What if all these struggles you've been going through are serving a higher purpose? What if a generational curse is going to be broken because of your battle? What if God brought you to the valley of Rochester? Because He is the God of turnaround. He is the God of second chances. He is the God of new beginnings. And He is the God of new endings. See, before David could come face to kneecap with Goliath and boldly declare, "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Before David could say that, he had to hear this. "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win." Here it is, you ready? You're only a boy. And he's been a man of war since his youth. David's story could have ended so many different ways. In fact, his story could have ended right there with only. Do you know only? You know only, the spirit of lack and limitation. Have you met only? David's like rattling off his resume to Saul like it's a job interview for a position in the battle. And he says, "I'm really good at fighting stuff that's bigger than me. I beat a lion one time. I beat a bear one time. Come on, put me in, coach." Saul looks down on him. He says, You're only a boy." And I can't help but wonder what your only moment from your past is still stuck in your head, haunting your thoughts and limiting your success. Remember, Saul at this point was not supposed to be the enemy. He was supposed to be the friend. And oftentimes it's a friend's words that cut the deepest. Saul was saying, "But you're only." And David said, No. I've never faced this giant before, but I brought the same God to this fight that I brought to the last fight. David said, "I conquered the lion. I defeated the bear. And if the lion didn't have a chance, and if the bear didn't have a chance, that pagan giant who mocks the armies of the living God is going down." Church, I predict an upset victory over every battle in your life. I predict a stunning turnaround where you, the unexpected hero, rise up and conquer. An epic victory is at hand. But we have to remember, forgive me, English teachers, but it ain't over till it's over. And it ain't over. So stop telling your story as if it were already over. You tell your story like, I got a divorce. That's not the end of your story. That's not the last time you will love or be loved. That's not the end of your story. Stop telling your story like it's over. I was doing pretty good, and then I lost my job. That's not the end of the story. It's not over. He's the God of turnarounds. He's the God who specializes in turning crucifixions into resurrections. It's not over until we win. It's not over until light overcomes the darkness. It's not over. And this is the part that I wrestled with most this week. And I just feel like we need to hear this part perhaps today more than ever. Because the world is in a very strange place. We're living in crazy times. In Luke 21, Jesus actually talks about what we call the end times, which I don't know about you, but as I look around at all the craziness that's happening in the world around me, it just seems so incredibly different, scary different. What a uniquely scary time to be alive. And people, I've seen it, people are terrified by it. So again, Jesus even said in Luke 21, during those times, here's what he said, people will be fainting with fear and foreboding of what is coming on the world. He says, when all of this comes crumbling down around you, you'll see people around you and they'll be terrified. You'll look at the world and you'll look at the failing economy. You'll look at the wars and rumors of wars. You'll look at the tragedies, and people will be terrified. And then I imagine him smiling when he goes on to say, at that time, straighten up, raise your heads, because you know your redemption is drawing near. Everyone else is passing out. Everyone else is terrified over the state of the world. When Jesus says, at that time, when you, as a follower of me, you just straighten up, square your shoulders, and look up, because you know that your redemption is drawing near. Isn't that a powerful image? I love the image. I can't help but remember how we used to have to stand in boot camp. It's kind of... I just love that image. It's like, yep, I see what's happening. Yeah, I saw that news report. And that one. Yeah, and that one. I saw it. I heard about that. Yeah. And you know what? I'm not afraid. I refuse to be afraid. I'm not afraid of what is to come, because I've turned to the back of the book and I've read the end of the story. I know what's coming. I know how this whole story ends. So when those things start to happen and everyone else is fainting and passing out and falling out, you just look up and go, it ain't over till it's over. Yes, it looks bad. Yes, it feels like the end is near, but I know God is still in control. Nothing that has happened has shocked my God off the throne. And somehow, right in the midst of all the chaos and the madness, there's this ability not only to not be among those fainting and falling out, but to even find it in your heart to rejoice in Jesus Christ. Rejoice because we know how the story ends. It could have been a completely different story. But the grace and the mercy and the love and the patience of Jesus Christ stepped in at just the right moment. I'm going to read this verse again, and I want to invite you to, when you get home, pull this verse up in a piece of paper and personalize it. Put your name in place of David. Put your fight in place of David's fight. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. I know how the story ends. And if you want to see the victory, you have to fight what's in front of you. The good news is, you're not alone. You don't have to fight the good fight alone. Let's finish how we started. Turn to your neighbor and remind them, I know how this story ends. Do it again. I know how this story ends. I know God's going to get the glory from my story. I know how it ends. Remember, the Bible tells us that He leads us from glory to glory, from strength to strength. So don't give up. Don't lose heart. There's more for you to do. You have a legacy to pass on. The rest of your life can be the best of your life because you know how the story ends. Last verse and we're done. Romans 8:18. Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory He will reveal to us later. Father, we thank You that even in moments where we're tempted to be among those who are fainting and falling out and giving up, Your word, Your presence gives us the strength to endure, to stand up and fight for what's right. We humbly pray, Father, Your healing upon the land. We pray Your forgiveness. And Your mercy upon the United States of America. May there be healing and reconciliation and recovery. May those who declare Your name stand up. We believe that You're still in control. We believe that the story will end with You still on the throne. Thank You, Father. In Jesus' name.